Mija, Netuaña, Joe Calderon. Hello, my name is Joe Calderon. My wife was supposed to be here and do this, and she was going to do it in our language, but she was having respiratory problems with the smoke. So here I am, and it's not going to be in our language. It's going to be in our language. I acknowledge our tribal relatives, past, present, and emerging. The original caretakers of the land today known as Los Angeles County, Riverside County, parts of San Bernardino County, parts of Orange County, as well as the 4 southern Channel Islands. I thank the ancestors for their teachings of living in harmony with the lands, waters, minerals, plants, and animal relatives here and across our large unceded territory. I'm going to sing you a song in our language. Last night, I sang an ancestral song. Today, I'm going to sing a song that we sing when we do our big time, our California gatherings. I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina yakina. I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina yakina. I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina, I wish koneha, hamin kope, eyo mama yakina yakina. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to take my mask off, actually. I am double vaccinated, just to verify. Okay. My name is Traci Kato-Kiriyama. My pronouns are they and she. And I'm so honored and so happy to be here. I will serve as moderator for the evening. We are going to first start off with a written land acknowledgement, and then we will show a trailer. So just start with this. We acknowledge our existence on the unceded land of Tongva, Gabrielino, Ahashiman, Quiche, the neighboring land of the Chumash. Some of our prep has happened via Zoom, which is based in San Jose, California, on Muwekma Ohlone land. The water through which we nourish and grow comes from Payahanadu, known as the Owens Valley, the lands of the Numu, Paiute, and Niue, Shoshone, and crosses over the lands of many more. Comes from the land of the Mono Lake, Katsirika tribe, comes from the Colorado River, the land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and people. We make these acknowledgements not only as a lesson of a history of genocide, stolen land, and forced removal, but to continue relearning how we interact in the present with the land and with the communities of Indigenous folks still here, living and thriving, while struggling for sovereignty and caretakership. We approach land acknowledgements as part of a larger commitment to realizing new possibilities for a future actualized in genuine accountability to our interconnectedness, towards reparations and repair from and reckoning with the foundations, institutions, and systems of this country, towards a future of honoring the self-determination of ancestral and current caretakers. I recognize that my acknowledgements will continue to be flawed and filled with the holes of ignorance, and these vocalizations must constantly evolve, as it must be a reflection of our greater process and greater purpose. We acknowledge through films like this and all the relations you have built and will continue to build that we are here together and we are here to build, and there is much more to do, and so we show up. So we recognize tonight Paeahunaru, the place where the water always flows, with this panel discussion and this celebration too of the film Manzanar Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust. So we will show a trailer first to just bring us into this space together. So let's please welcome all the folks coming to join us on the panel today, our filmmaker and director and cinematographer, awesome leader, and Kaneko. Producer, Jin Yoo-Kim, our other fearless leader. I will be reading everyone's bios in full in just a second, but I want to get them out here so they can sit down. The wonderful Mariko Embrey. The amazing Danelle Bacoch-Gutierrez. And from the TreePeople, Lipkis. Let us acknowledge all of them. So I'm going to read their bios. They deserve to have them read in full. In no particular order, I'm going to start. I'll start with in the row here. Let's do it that way. Okay. Jin Yoo-Kim, producer, is a Korean Bolivian American filmmaker producing Manzanar Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust. I'm just, like I said, I'll read this in full. We just saw that, but yes. A feature documentary exploring California water issues through the eyes of Native American, Japanese American World War II incarcerees, and environmentalists. She is the impact producer for Try Harder, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival 2021. She co-produced A Woman's Work, the NFL's Cheerleader Problem, and K-Town 92. Jin served as the digital engagement impact producer for Waking Dream, and was the LA theatrical impact producer for Blowin' Up. She directed a short film as part of A-Doc, Asian Am COVID Stories, called Spam Fight, and is developing a food docuseries and writing a feature comedy. She is a 2020-2021 Sundance Creative Producers Fellow, a 2020 Film Independent × CNN Original Series Docuseries Intensive Fellow, a 2020 Film Independent Doc Lab Fellow, and was a 2017 Firelight Media Impact Producing Fellow. She received her MFA in Film and TV Production from USC and a BA in Psychology and Cinema and Media Studies from Wellesley College. Woohoo! All right. Kaneko, director, producer, writer, is known for her personal films that weave her intimate aesthetic with the complex intricacies of political reality. She is an Emmy winner, and her work has screened internationally and been broadcast on PBS Independent Lens and the NewsHour. She has been commissioned by the National Endowment for the Arts, the California Endowment, and the Skirball Cultural Center. Her films include A Flicker in Eternity, based on the diary and letters of Stanley Hayami, Against the Grain, an artist's survival guide to Peru, highlighting Peruvian political artists under ex-president Alberto Fujimori. 100% Human Hair, a musical set in a Korean-owned wig shop for the AFI Directing Workshop for Women, and Overstay, about undocumented foreign workers in Japan. Fluent in Japanese and Espanol, Kaneko has been a Fulbright and Japan Foundation Artist Fellow and been funded by Just Films/Ford, as well as Vision Maker Media, CAM, and among many others. She is a 2020 Film Independent Doc Lab Fellow and participated in the 2020 Big Sky Pitch. She is a member of New Day Films, an educational distribution cooperative. She has an MFA from UCLA in film directing, teaches at Pitzer College, and is the artist mentor for VC's Armed with a Camera Fellowship and Kaneko. Mariko Embrey is the granddaughter of Sue Kunitomi Embrey, who founded the Manzanar Committee and led the annual Manzanar pilgrimage starting in 1969. As a community organizer based in Los Angeles, Monica follows her grandmother's footsteps and is a member of the Manzanar Committee. For the last 15 years, Monica has worked to advance climate justice, leading efforts to phase out fossil fuels and advance affordable and accessible clean energy solutions. She is currently a senior associate director at the Sierra Club, leading California's 5 energy campaigns. Monica. Next we have Andy Lipkis, is the founder of TreePeople and Accelerate Resilience LA. Andy started planting trees to rehabilitate smog and fire-damaged forests as a teenager. By age 18, he founded TreePeople and served as its president from 1973 to 2019. Lipkis is a pioneer of urban and community forestry and urban watershed management. The Society of American Foresters and the American Society of Landscape Architects have respectively granted Lipkis the honorary titles of Forester and Landscape Architect in recognition of his life's work. Andy Lipkis. And Danelle Bacoch-Gutierrez resides on the lands of her dad, Michael Bacoch, Sr., and is a citizen of the Big Pine Paiute Tribe of the Owens Valley, BPPT, indigenously known as Tovawahamatu. Her mom, Geraldine Lundy Bacoch, is from the Kutsataka people, and their lands are of Mono Lake Lee Vining areas. Danelle has served many roles for her people and was elected to be the secretary and vice chairwoman for the Big Pine Paiute Tribal Council, serving 5 years. She was an elected Owens Valley Indian Water Commissioner, EPA Environmental Advisory Board member, and was a writer for the American Indian Writers Subgroup for Nellis Air Force Base. Acting chair, Bi-State Tribal Natural Resources Committee, Bighorn Sheep Committee, NAFB, Document Review Committee for Department of Defense, Tribal Monitor for NAFB and BPPT, Tribal Revegetation Committee, Portland State University, and DOI, Ethnographic Manuscript Transcriber, and Cultural Committee member for her tribe, where she worked with the elders of her people and was taught many traditional information pieces to protect and to preserve. The knowledge she learned throughout her years and attending Cerro Coso Community College for Human Services, Business, Anthropology, and Archaeology has helped her in her employment as bookkeeper, auditor, case counselor, and now as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Big Pine Paiute Tribe of the Owens Valley. Danelle, wow. Thank you so much. As we get into what I am looking forward to as a discussion where we might want to even have you be able to see each other more, maybe we'll moon shape this, but we can think about that. I wanted to just recognize, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Senchin Buddhist Temple in South Central, but I always will remember learning from Reverend Maskodani the concept of gasho. And so gasho sort of acknowledges everything that happened for every single person in this room and elsewhere, every single thing that happened in the universe to bring us to this moment right now. And so to bring us here, to really be in the room together in this moment right now, while still acknowledging all those who couldn't be in the room, I'd like to take us through just a short exercise. And if you can, just lower your head and close your eyes. And I invite you to just think about water, your relationship to water, the way it feels, the way it smells, the way you see it, the way you hear it, the way you feel it when it is full, forceful, rushing, dripping, dissipating, evaporating, and when it is full once again. And as you will, breathe. Don't forget to breathe. And sit in the place that you are in with water. All right. And just take one last breath in. And as you open your eyes, go ahead and breathe out. Thank you so much. All right. Are we all here now? We're all here together? Yes. So I wanted to begin with just an acknowledgement of tonight's panel being right after the opening night for the Los Angeles Asia Pacific Film Festival and the showing of Manzanar Diverted, which is huge. That's a huge feat. And so I would love to hear from both Anne and Jin. You've been screening this now since February, but virtually. And last night was your first experience letting it be on a big screen with the big sound and within community, within audience. So I'd like to just hear, like, where are you at this moment? You know, how are you feeling?
Thank you, Tracy, for all of that. And yeah, I was just sharing with a friend, another filmmaker friend, about just how it just kind of feels like with everything that's been happening, we almost kind of lived a life through screens. And though we were super excited about premiering it at Big Sky Film Festival in February, and you know, all the rest of the stuff we've been doing virtually, it felt kind of like not, we missed that energy that we feel when we're together. And we had the opportunity of showing this film in Payahunadu for like 4 different screenings that we had back to back, and we loved the energy and the conversations we had there. But for me and Anne also, like for us to be the opening night of the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival is just really, it's kind of like a homecoming for us because we met here. Like we met in the Armed with the Camera Fellowship in class of 2007, dating us a little bit. But it was Anne's first time mentoring, and I was a fellow during that time. I met my husband during the fellowship. We're still together and sort of happy, mostly happy. But like yesterday was definitely like just a very, it was just you could almost feel like, it was a palpable feeling, like you felt the love, and you felt, you know, even if we didn't have like full capacity, it felt full capacity. Like my heart felt really full. And there's something about the energy not being able to leave the theater, like where it just felt like everything was just in there together, and we were all experiencing this collective sense of like kind of awakening to our own relationship with water, our own relationship with our own communities and other people's communities. And also just like being together again. Like we've, you know, Anne and I come to this film festival every year, right? And it's so nice to see familiar faces. It's so nice to see so many things that haven't changed, even amongst all the changes that we've experienced in the last 2 years. That was very difficult personally and in the world. So it was really special for us.
I think for me, having been born and raised in this city, and to finally really publicly show this film here in this place is really very meaningful. And I think that, you know, on a more personal note, I lost my mom this year, and to be able to screen it, and she had just been acknowledged at the JACC this year because she had been a big donor. I mean, she's a big supporter and donor to this community, you know, JANA and JCC. So to be able to screen it in that place, even though, I mean, I know she was there, but it was very special, I think.
And what I know that there might be some people here who actually didn't see the film yet. By show of hands, who did see the film? Who was there? Oh, many didn't see it yet. Oh, so you're just getting a taste. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to share along, you know, we got to see the trailer, but of course that's just a little slice of it.
I'll just say, so this film, you know, took a long time to make. It was like over 5 years. I think that for me, it really is kind of a bringing together of a lot of interests and a lot of concerns. You know, my parents, my grandparents were all incarcerated during World War II, not at Manzanar, but, you know, during World War II. You know, my family's been in Los Angeles 3 generations. My mom was always really adamant that we conserve water during the drought and that we, you know, be mindful of our resources. I think that, and then when I started doing research for this film, I also realized, and I came to sort of thinking about Manzanar as wanting to really look at the land and the people, right? So Native Americans, obviously. And to really think about those connections of forced removal between, you know, these two communities who had experienced, you know, being forced to Paihahunadu and being forced away from the homeland. So that's sort of how this film came to be. And of course the people who had, you know, ranchers who had come there to try to cultivate or, you know, make a life there, had many of whom were bought out by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And this is this place where we get our water from over 200 miles away. And as I researched this, I realized I didn't really know how this all worked. I mean, I had this vague notion of how it worked, but I really didn't quite understand. And so that's, I think, really the impetus for me of making this film. I think, you know, if you haven't seen the film, it takes kind of a big, ambitious look at over 100 years of history, and weaving these histories together and really trying to find these common threads of memory of this place juxtaposed with maybe how we might consider moving forward. So I hope you'll all take advantage. Right now, actually, until tomorrow, is it? On Tadaima, online you can see the film. So, you know, please, you know, hopefully you can take from this conversation that we're gonna have today and then, you know, watch the film too.
Yeah, and we'll definitely we'll make sure to repeat all of that again, as well as other opportunities that are coming up so that people can see it. Yeah, it is a definite must-see. So with what you're saying in terms of, you know, knowledge, right, and the things that you knew, the things that you didn't know, I'd actually like to pass the mic to Andy Lipkis, actually. In the film, you talked about a planting project in the city here, and then being notified by the Owens Valley to be careful of the kind of species you were planting. so as not to, in your words, or I guess you were quoting them, to increase consumption and to hurt the folks up there more. And how you weren't really at that moment aware and of that sort of relationship between Los Angeles and where the water was coming from, and also that probably most of Los Angeles doesn't know. So I'd love to talk to you, to hear from you more about that moment of hearing that, and sort of that in relationship to the next shifts that you made with the Tree People.
Thanks. You got it right. So I was born and raised in LA, and I started planting trees to respond to the forest dying because of the smog that we were making in Los Angeles. It was moving from here up into the mountains and being breathed into by the trees, and poison of the smog was killing the tree, was actually burning the chlorophyll and the needles of the trees. And when I turned 15, I learned that the forest was dying. And that was a place of my refuge. I grew up here in the smog. My parents would send me to the mountains every summer where we could play and breathe. Before 1970, before the Clean Air Act, we had no protection from air pollution. And I grew up in Southwest LA, Baldwin Hills. I didn't have asthma, I didn't have lung disease, but just breathing the air, it hurt. And I got home and my mom would put a kettle of water on the stove and make steam for me to breathe, just so I could take a deep breath. And that was what it was like growing up here. We went to the mountains where the trees were purifying the air and getting to play, getting to breathe, getting to experience life. And suddenly at age 15, we're told that the smog that we're making in LA is killing the trees that are trying to save our lives. And that was crazy. Ultimately, I started trying to save the forest with smog-resistant trees. We learned that nobody was doing it, but the Forest Service told us they existed, and the government just didn't care, so said it was up to us kids. I grew up in a progressive family that was always like, as we learn stuff, let's respond, let's not just go, God, that's too bad. So I realized that we needed to engage LA in planting trees just so they'd understand it, and that trees have a big benefit here. And as we started announcing public plantings is when we heard from people in the Owens Valley. And I was stunned. Well, that planted a seed in my heart and in my mind that really began to grow with awareness. And without telling decades of stories, my heart opened. The more I learned about the impact of our taking the water on the people who lived there, who had managed, the Paiute, Shoshone people had managed the water for 10,000 years before we moved them off the land and managed it sustainably, and the impact of us taking the water. And then the more I learned about it, because of my family's tradition, we're just always moved by social justice issues, and that swayed me. But what really flipped me into activism on the water, yes, we learned, let's plant drought-tolerant trees and save as much of the water as we can. But much deeper was when the Rodney King trial happened and the unrest that followed, and so much damage was done and so many people were killed and hurt. The sociologists who studied Los Angeles said to prevent that kind of violence and undo the pain that was causing it, we needed to create 50,000 jobs for chronically unemployed and underemployed urban youth in Los Angeles. So, because so many people didn't have work and the frustration of the poverty. And I'm one of the founders of the Los Angeles Conservation Corps, and so we were creating a few jobs, a few hundred jobs for kids, but 50,000. And I got the first money into LA after the unrest to do urban greening, help with neighborhoods, fruit trees, but it was a drop in the bucket. And I asked the question, what would it cost to create those 50,000 jobs? And it was $500 million a year. It wasn't coming to LA. A couple more sentences and we'll be over this hump because this ties it up. I was looking for that $500 million, and it came. The federal government brought a $500 million project to Los Angeles, and it was to raise the walls of the LA River, to put more concrete on the river to get rid of our rain. I was going, $500 million, we don't see that kind of money ever. I mean, I didn't think so, and I'm a little more used to the number now, but if we're gonna spend $500 million to get rid of water, how much water are we throwing away? And it turned out that the water we throw away, that falls in rain in Los Angeles, is half the water we need. It falls here, and all of it that falls here, we throw away. And I went, well, that's nuts. And what do we pay to get rid of it? So DWP imports the water. At the time, it was $1 billion a year. It's approaching $2 billion a year to pay for the energy to pump the water, bring the water into LA. But we're also spending almost $1 billion to remove the water with another agency, flood control. All of this while we're importing water and creating this pain, social pain, hurting people, suppress and damaging that valley. And it was just insane. I thought, well, we shouldn't be spending any money on getting rid of water when we need it. And then the more I looked, the more I saw the insanity. And nobody wanted to stop doing what they were doing. And the story goes on, and that's what got me engaged in the Valley and other stuff. I'll talk more about it, but we have more than ever the opportunity and urgently the need, just so we have water in the coming mega drought that we're now in the middle of. We could be meeting our water needs and employing 50,000 people, retrofitting Los Angeles to function as a healthy urban watershed. Because even in the low amount of water, 10 to 15 inches of water that we receive every year, that's half the water we need. And if we recycle the water that we're sending to the sewage treatment plant and conserve, so we just live on 50 gallons a day, which we got to in the last drought, plus clean up the aquifer that we polluted in the San Fernando Valley, we would have 100% of the water we need. That's a system of justice. And we wouldn't have to import it from the Owens Valley. That water could stay. And instead, we're doing violence. And we're living in this system of oppress, control, take, dominate. And there's a flip side that I think it expresses maybe what many of us believe in and can be, as modeled by the forest and by good people, that we can actually live cooperatively and mutually supportively and not be extracting wealth from people and transferring it. And I think that's what I'm here to talk about, how feasible it is to heal these issues.
Thank you. And we'll definitely be coming back to each of you to leave us with specific marching orders. So we'll keep some of that, and
I'll give you more numbers to make it credible.
Okay.
Eventually.
Yeah, I mean, even in terms of numbers, I think some of the numbers that hit me were the years. So Kathy Bancroft at the beginning of the film talks about, and throughout, how the land was taken care of by her ancestors for thousands of years, hundreds of generations, right? And then in the 1860s, as the lands were taken over through massacres and forced removal, and then by 1926, the Patsiata Lake was almost run dry, right? So within 60 years versus 10,000 years, how much can change when we don't honor the caretakers first, who have the wisdom, obviously, to live in concert for thousands of years. with the land that now we have so much trouble with. So, Danelle, I want to take it to you. And I'm not sure if you all want to, just because we have one mic that we're sharing, feel free to wipe it. Oh, you all have mics. Oh, there's a whole passing I see, so it's freaking me out. Okay, great. Keep your own mic. Danelle, it really hit me a lot, of course, every time you're speaking in the film. And, there's this moment at the LADWP meeting, and that folks drove in, you were able to call in through a video function, but people were there to address a broken water pipe issue. I was looking forward to seeing this actually in community last night. The moment where a commissioner trying to address and trying to, with good intentions, help the situation and offer to pay for the broken pipe as a private citizen. And then even people within that room were clapping. And then you came on to say, I don't want side deals, side handlings. DWP needs to do the right thing and take responsibility and pay for this. And also, by you saying the water is for everybody, I felt like the message was that it's everyone's responsibility, and the people who have the power need to be held accountable by us, by the people. And it was so awesome last night in the theater. I don't know if y'all heard this, but after you came on and said that, people in the crowd were like, just snapping, and that was so awesome. So I would just, if you could kind of give us a little bit more on where relations are at now, where things are at now, and what do you think are some of the challenging next steps?
Manahu, Inaniane, Danelle Bacoch-Gutierrez, Tobawahamatu Wani Kimudu, Inawa Michael Bacoch Sr., Tobawahamatu Kimudu, Ibia, Geraldine Lundy Bacoch, Katsirika Kimudu. In our way, we always introduce ourselves because if there's people in the audience that are of our relatives and somewhere from another tribe, they might acknowledge our people, our grandmas, or our dads and stuff. So it's really important for us to make a connection when we introduce ourselves and to others and of the people we come from and who we're proud of that we come from. That part was a while back, but then we still have an issue, and I don't believe I have approval to speak on that. It's still continuing another portion of it, but it was neat to see a lot of people from different tribes going to LA on a little caravan, and to be down there and to support our people, for the broken irrigation pipe that we were willing to fix, but apparently it was on DWP's land, and DWP wouldn't allow us to go on the lands to fix it. And we were pretty much told not to set foot on that part. And so we said, well, then you guys fix it, it's on your land. And then that's when everything occurred. And then Christina Nunes, she did get up and she did offer to pay, but to me, I was shocked. Here we go again, DWP not being accountable, not being held responsible for something that they are so gung-ho on their rulings and their lands and stuff, but yet not when it comes right down to it to fix what needed to be fixed and to do the proper right thing. But then that came with the deal of us, as stated in the film, with future water rights for our people, which was another, to me, slap to the face and very unappreciated and disrespectful to my people and to my tribe and to my ancestors that were forced marched many years ago and that resided in Tovawahamatu. And those lands are beautiful. We self-irrigated those areas and those lands. Many tribes and various people that came into the valley felt that connection and the power of it. It's a sacred place for all of us. I mean, where else do you have a volcano and right above us a glacier with that water running right beside my house from the creek? So it's a blessing in many ways with all our vegetation and plants. And when we did the irrigation, we made that whole area lush. All the tribes throughout, all the people. We weren't tribes back then. We had our own names and our own villages, you know, through the Owens Valley, Paiute. And, but it's just, there's just so much. There's a lot still. The disrespect. I would, you know, well, I'll do the marching orders later.
Yeah.
But I believe that this movie and this film and this documentary and having Kathy Bancroft, who's a great person and a great friend of mine, who's a Tipo for the Pine Paiute Tribe, was amazing. She speaks a word that we all feel through the whole area from all our people. The Shoshones, the Numo, and the Nui, the Paiutes. That's how we feel. And the lands, they connect all the way up from Mono Lake by my mom's people, the Katsidikas. And it comes down, and there's creation stories up there from where the water comes out, straight out. Creation stories up there in that area. And it comes down and it filters through. So it's a lot of sacredness that comes through these lands and these waterways. A lot of prayers come and travel all the way down from the top, all the way through us, met with our tribes and our lands and our prayers and our ceremonies to protect these. Like, water is so precious to our people. It's a birth and life and death ceremonies for our people and everything in between. We always give thanks. We have to introduce ourselves when we come into a water, a lake. That's who we are as a people. That's how much respect we have it. It's like you're meeting an old friend and you need to put your hand in and circle it, not to scare it because it's a spirit, and introduce yourself. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to swim, I'm here to bathe, I'm here to drink water, I'm here to fish, and I'm here to hunt tules, ducks, you know. I'm here to gather. You introduce yourself and you respect it. That's how much water is important to our people. It's very important. It's our life, it's in us. It's the channels that came through. Even through Patsiata, we're doing the nomination in the register. All the tribes, all the Tipos to the Owens Valley and Shoshone. And geologically, there's 64 springs and waterways that come into Patsiata that feed it. 64 streams and river, you know, just everything. And that's why it's called Patsiata, where all the water comes through and gathers in one spot. That's why it's so sacred, because it holds so many waterways, so many ways from time immemorial, from the time our people were first put here by Creator to respect the areas and respect the lands. And that's why it's so important. We hold it dear to us. That's why we hold our lakes so dear to us. That's why a lot of us are fighting for Patsiata. We hope to win and get that lake back as a lake as it should be, because it's hurting. It's hurting really bad. And that's a spirit in itself. And I'm just so thankful for this movie to bring light and to share the hardships and touch down a little bit on the forced march and stuff, and touch down a little bit on everything, but to bring it forth in a good way and to get the word out of what's really going on. And there's so many more stories. There's so many more. As an ethnographic transcriber for our people in the stories, it's like unbelievable. The trauma, the tragedies, but the heroic efforts of our people, the heroic efforts of our families that fought against the soldiers, that sacrificed themselves for families, that came back as little kids coming along. One of them was my mom's people. They were marched all the way from Long Valley and they escaped by Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest is farther up north and from here. But she was a little girl, and her mom ran to the mountains in the middle of the night, and they walked all the way back on the foothills way up in the mountains, back up to Long Valley from Ridgecrest, and they traveled at night so they wouldn't be caught by the soldiers. So there's a lot of amazing stories, and that's what we hold ourselves and structure us today as Native people, is to keep that fight alive, but to keep what's right, but also don't lose our ceremonial ways and our love for the lands, because that's what strengthens us to protect it. So I just want to thank Anne for her movie. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Danelle. I do have a follow-up question. I know maybe you can't speak on a current specific fight, but are the Kutsurika people and the Niue and Numu, as well as the original folks of the Colorado River, are there sort of some kind of network or coalition? These are all the places that we pull water from, right? So is there some sort of larger, can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, we have the Owens Valley Indian Water Commissioners, and they are comprised of all the tribes of the Owens Valley, and I was a commissioner. It's an elected position through tribes. It's the Bishop, Blunt Pine, and Big Pine, and they were trying to get 4 independents, and I believe Benton in there, and I believe now the Kutsudikas, but there's like so much more. We've been gaining ground, especially when that was developed, was years ago. But now with these new issues, and now with more law coming in and establishing our rights, and we know now we need to include everybody. You know, even as far as Timbisha, we got other tribes from other places willing to back us up and, you know, on other issues. But then again, it's really great to work with our local people also, and the ranchers, and people like Andy and everybody, the water committee. I mean, everybody to know that water is important through our Owens Valley. And that's a good collaboration right now, you know, and it's slowly working. I mean, it's difficult, but there's a lot of things we can do still, I believe.
As we must, right?
Yeah, and Andy's deal is like amazing, and he needs to really be heard on that, and that's another positive solution. And another way to stop ground pumping from Owens Valley, because that's what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And us, the tribes, trying to fight that, because like the lady said in the movie, when you groundwater pump, you're just totally destroying the water tables. You're totally destroying the reserves. Not only that's going to be coming down this way, but also what's up there, and it's going to kill the waterways.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to really stop. And the tribes really need to be involved in the management of waterways, and to include our engineering ways on how it once was a long time ago, and incorporate that into water management planning with DWP, but also with other partners, and to do something positive instead of destructive.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Monica, in the film, you were talking about how we don't build cities around water tables, and what if we had? Instead, we build these huge metropolises that cannot sustain the kind of density that we have now. And you also spoke to so many things, and you are a legacy of your grandma's work. You know, you are in the continuum of her work, and you talked a lot about resistance and water as resistance. And I'm sure that we're, as we all are at this point, so filled up with so many things and questions and thoughts. So I would love for you to just address any of that. But, you know, speaking to resistance would be great. But whatever you want to say.
Sure. Yeah, well, resistance to what first, right? Mm-hmm. So thinking about, you know, my grandmother and my family, and what it must have been like for her to be 18 years old and get on a bus with blacked out windows and a train where you couldn't see outside, and then leave Little Tokyo, where she had grown up, to then end up in Paiute, right? And then what was called a Manzanar War Relocation Center, where there were barbed wire fences all around and armed guards with machine guns that faced in, and to be treated like a war enemy when you were born in this country and had thought you had constitutional rights that were being violated. And so I think water was a really critical way in which incarcerees actually used resistance while in the camps. So people like my uncle actually went up early to help build the barracks and help set up the infrastructure. And one of the things they had to build was the reservoir. And so the water reservoir, they were going to build a concentration camp for 10,000 people. They needed to have a significant amount of water. And so at the water reservoir, one of my favorite places to go visit when I go back every year to see Manzanar is to look at the graffiti. So people like my uncle went up early to help actually lay the concrete, and in it, people wrote with their fingertips graffiti right under the water line. Some of them were political statements, some statements against the US, some statements against Japan, some statements for peace and just against war. But my favorite one is one that says quite simply, I love myself. And that to me is one of the most powerful resistance. In a moment when you are being called an enemy deserving of being forcibly incarcerated with armed guards, to declare your love for yourself and to say that this war hysteria, the racism, the xenophobia is not going to take away my own sense of self and worth is incredible resistance to maintain that sense of self and dignity while in a camp. And the other kind of main way that many people, especially after the camp was up and running and it was clear that it was not going to be closing promptly, was that folks started building gardens and using water to help create both beautiful gardens in the middle of the desert as a way of finding refuge. A lot of gorgeous places and parks were built around all of the camp. And then also water to farm and grow their own food. A fun, quick story that my grandmother would share that she hated apple butter. And as a little girl, I'd be like, Grandma, why do you hate apple butter so much? What did apple butter ever do to you? And she would share that when she first would get in line for the mess halls, and when they would serve, they would put a pile of rice, and then the people would put a slab of apple butter right on top of the rice that would melt in. And that is not how Japanese Americans eat rice. And so she hated apple butter forever. And so folks in camp actually started growing their own food to help supplement the rations that were being given at the mess hall so that they could have food that really honored what was healthy and familiar. And so water was used from fingertip graffiti in the reservoir to gardens all around to beautify their landscape, to literally helping bring nourishing food. And so resistance to that, imperialist war hysteria really did happen. It was not a passive incarceration, and the ways in which people learned how to survive under unbearable and unlivable conditions is pretty powerful, and I think continues today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. It's funny because my dad would say the exact same thing. And my dad and your grandma, they were very good friends, so I'm sure they had a good chuckle about that. Thank you, first of all. We're being allowed to go a little bit longer, so we're going to get an extra 15 minutes right now, because I don't want to, I figured anybody who came to the film last night and came today, and then folks who came without even seeing the film, this is probably a room full of people who want to know what to do, what can we do, right? Nancy Masters in the film says something that I really appreciate. Part of the ploy is to outlive the people that remember. Part of the ploy is to outlive the people that remember, right? So part of our strategy must be to outfight the people in power. So what are our marching orders? We will actually end with some opportunities to see the film because I think that that's important too. So we're gonna end with two of you, but marching orders, let's, we need to hear everybody. So Andy, I'll ask you to begin. Is that okay?
Sure.
And you just have a couple minutes per person though, so just think about that. But I'll let you begin, Andy. There you go.
Hi. If this works through the mask, I'll keep it on. Sorry, I took it off. I am vaccinated. I want to tell you what's possible, but I also, the story about the water pipe is so compelling, and people, I don't think people know it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry I'm speaking this, but what's happening today, the forced relocation, the people of the valley were removed by the U.S. Army in around 1900 and marched across the desert to camps That was what you were hearing about the relocation, and then were brought back, but they were removed from their land. When they were brought back into reservation, they no longer had access to the water that they had managed for 10,000 years. This irrigation pipe was the water that they were allowed to have at the Big Pine Reservation that was brought to them. The pipe broke, and that was their water supply for growing their food. They weren't allowed to fix the pipe, which was their only source of water to grow food. This is today. This is now. So the relocation continues because this incident that we're talking about, this is still true. They were not allowed to fix the pipe so they could grow their food 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It hasn't changed, except that exposure that you saw on the film forced that pipe to be fixed. But they still don't have access to the rights, to the water that has been taken on our behalf. And so this lives on. And our ability to deny the pain, it's unbelievable to think that this is being done on our name. And it continues. And there seems to be so much resistance to change. And when change is so within reach that we could have abundant water here and employ people who don't have a chance of working here now because we pay for oil companies to pump water into LA. And because that water that we're bringing from the Owens Valley seems to be free. And it's insane. So the last thing I wanted to say about that is that we move to denial. We want to think things are normal and there isn't extraordinary pain being suffered. And when there's stuff happening around the world, that people are being tortured and whatever, we somehow, because it's too painful to believe they could be happening on our watch, on our behalf, we shut it down. Somehow, more than anything, we have to open our hearts, and that's the tremendous value of the film, to show our history of this. But I want to underscore that we're still doing it, and it's unconscionable and it's hard to just sit and live knowing that that's happening. And I as a privileged white person, I had to say that, and I'm sorry. I hope I'm not being too pedantic here, but thank you. And if I get another chance, I'll give you the recipe for how we can have the water locally, and me too. But the social side.
Yeah, and I think also if you have information on where people can find more, I know that people can come visit you also, right?
Well, I retired from TreePeople, so I'm not visitable. But TreePeople has a cold water education center that shows how practical it is to capture the rain and employ people and really heal the land here. So yeah, Coldwater Canyon, Mulholland Drive. We took over a piece of property where William Mulholland's 1920s buildings were moved after he built the St. Francis Dam. That after it was built, the buildings were moved down here. It was made into a fire station. Coldwater Canyon, Mulholland Drive, now TreePeople's headquarters. But after that dam was built, it broke, and it was one of the largest floods ever in California. Hundreds of people died in the 1920s. The pain of not respecting the water, not respecting the knowledge, and employing it for the benefit of all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you. Monica, marching orders.
Don't ask me twice. So my grandmother started bringing young people back to Manzanar in 1969, despite mass resistance from folks from wanting to do that, and continued to bring people back until her passing. And now my dad and many others continue the legacy. And so if there's one clear part of the marching orders that I really learned from my grandmother, it's to be in community and meet others in struggle. None of us can do the work that we need to do to help protect our planet and people, including water, alone. And so to be in community is, I think, the number one component that brings me the strength and fortitude to keep fighting. There are so many fights. Just last week, we helped win an announcement to phase out oil drilling in the neighborhood that Andy grew up in Baldwin Hills. an area where there was a massive dam leak that did take people's lives. Break actually because of the oil drilling decades ago, right? So I think there are infinite number of fights, whether it is ensuring that our refugees are not being attacked by the state, whether it is ending detention of children in camps, whether it is fighting for climate justice. There are so many fights and struggles today, but the most important part is to find other people to be in struggle with. And so that's what I would say. Whatever issue it is that you care about, go meet other people and change the world.
Thank you, Mariko. And Danelle, bringing us back to, the film, and I think that was something that I personally wanted to hear. Wisdom, opinions, marching orders, on how we can best be the most radical accomplices for what needs to happen next.
I think everybody needs to work on conserving water and there's so much that can be done, but it's an uphill battle, especially for our tribes. We've been battling this for generations upon generations. And the first march was actually 1863 in July. And a lot of people escaped to come back to their lands to live again. But I think just write support letters. When you see tribes fighting for what's right and for what's water and for land. I mean, you see this, we see so many of our relatives throughout this nation. Up by Minnesota fighting Line 3, there's so many people trying to keep the corporations from contaminations of oil, and their pipelines going through waterways that the water is going to be going through people's lands, and they are breaking. Those oil pipelines are breaking. And there's even a picture of one pipeline duct taped by the corporation, duct tape, so the oil won't leak into the water. We see the tragedies in the oceans with the oil spills and all the mammals. So water is precious not only to the lands, but also the oceans. Just support, just like the young lady was saying, just support, find an organization, but also right now we're in battles up in our way due to over pumping, which we're seeing our vegetation dying. I remember going when I was little, and my dad was a hunter and be able to cruise, and we'd stop everywhere. I'd say I was thirsty, we could stop anywhere, and he'd say, go up there behind this tree or by this rock and get some water. I'm like, what? And I go up there, yep, there's a little creek, and I would get water. Now I can't take my kids anywhere to these places, but other just a memory. This once had water here, and it's no more. Just when you see tribes struggling, if you can write letters of support on their behalf, that'd be really great. When we come down and have rallies, participation is great too for the outcome of the people, to show that we are supported, not just tribal, but from everybody, because it's all of us that are going to have to win this fight together, and preserving and protecting our water, because that's for everybody. And when the rains come down, that's prayers also too, Creator blessing these lands and to help out our areas. We pray for areas, we pray for lands, we pray for the water and rain to come to protect our areas. And I think that's like a spin-off of blessing your guys' areas with the rain, but it needs to be captured, just like Andy was saying. Water is water, it can be used in different ways, and should be respected and used right, because you can't waste everything, and that's how we used to do irrigation. We never wasted. And even growing up, don't waste things. Waste food, water, electricity even. But I think that's important for people to hopefully join in.
Thank you so much. And it's our job also to pay attention, to what you're saying, Andy, right? To not be in denial. And so when you do come down and face off with LADWP, we will be paying attention, and we are now connected with you. Many of us are going to be staying up with you on this to make sure that ways in which we can help join that fight, we will be there. And to Anne and Jin, again, because of films like this, that's the power, I think, of storytelling. That's the power of narrative and art, right? Because now you have connected us. All of us in this room are connected with everything that's been said and the people who said it. So we also want to support this film. What you mentioned, Tadaima, which is part of the Manzanar, it's the Memorial Pilgrimages group that does sort of weekly programming during the summertime, right? And so they're showing it on their website. But any other ways in which we can support, and please, if you could also mention the event happening in November.
Yes. I just had one more thing I wanted to add on to what Danelle was saying. The Monolei Kutsaraka tribe is seeking tribal federal recognition right now. And that's something that you can definitely support. There's a petition online for MoveOn.org. And I don't know how much you all know about this, but with tribal recognition, then a tribe of people are qualified to receive support from the government, and that is what they are seeking. So it's very important, and it's important to remember these people in that way. So that's one thing that you can definitely support right now. So in terms of the film, we have many film festivals coming up, and then we're also really excited to have these screenings with the Our Water LA Coalition, which we're sort of kicking off on November 4th at the LA Historic Park. So we've been working with TreePeople and many other local organizations, Lane, ECRs for environmental justice, and so we're trying to line up other screenings in the area. We have one at Self-Help Graphics on November 14th. That'll be sort of centered around the Boyle Heights area, but we're also, Pacoima, Bellflower, Compton. So we're really trying to bring people together from different communities all over the city to think and talk about these issues together. In terms of film festivals, I think we have on our agenda, Jin can chime in, but I think we've got Hawaii, San Diego, Buffalo, Portland, New Orleans. We've got Orange County, much closer, and I think we just screened in Ghana and India. So some of these are virtual, some of them are not, and you can just plug into our website. We're trying very hard to keep that current so that you can keep, on top of that. But our goal is to really bring the film to our local community first, so that we can really think about our local water issues, and then, hopefully this message can carry to California, the rest of the country, and abroad, because water is precious everywhere. So we are also trying to create curriculum so that people can create their own community screening. So, but it's a process doing this work. So anyway.
And did you mention the work with Sandago Obon?
Oh yeah, so we're hoping that they will also come and participate in our November 4th screening and have some, Obon dance beforehand, teaching people Obon. Obon, for those of you who don't know, is sort of similar to Dia de los Muertos. And I mean, it's very fitting since it's soon after Dia de los Muertos, when we all pay respect to our ancestors. And it is through dance or through altars, or, that we pay respect. So I think that, thematically, these screenings really want to honor our water history past and our past, but really think about how we can move forward in the future with those memories and with that knowledge.
Thank you, Anne. Jin, did you want to give us some last ways in which we can keep supporting the film?
No, I think Anne covered the ways you can support the film. And I just wanted to add that, one of our goals when we were making this film is to make sure that no matter what you knew coming into the film, you still left learning something about another community, or even more about your own community struggles, and how all of our communities are tied together. It's not just someone else's problem, it's not just some other community's history. There's active forces keeping us not knowledgeable about other people's communities. There are reasons why we don't have these things in history books, that it's not so clearly obvious. And it was our job as filmmakers to make sure that we presented this film that, you know, encompasses 100 years, but it's also pointing out and spotlighting like the infrastructures in place that have continued to forcibly remove people, incarcerate people, imprison people, keep us separate from each other. And so it is resistance work also to really understand each other and how all of our struggles are similar and the same. And when we band together, we can accomplish big goals. So I just wanted to like leave that as like hopefully our takeaway message.
Thank you so much. That's a great note to end on. We are connected. We are interconnected, right? We belong to each other. We are responsible for each other. So thank you so, so much. Can we give a huge round of applause to Danelle Bacoch-Gutierrez and Lipkis, Mariko Embrey, Jin Yoo-Kim, and Kaneko. And to Visual Communications, and to please watch all the films. Thank you so much.